What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Full Disclosure Podcast, and let's talk about it. Jake Paul versus Mike Perry went down about a week and a half ago. Jake Paul stopped Mike Perry in the 6th round after knocking him down 2 times previously. Going into the fight, and this is where I think we should start off. Going into the fight, we all kind of said this is going to be the fight where we get the answers that we've kind of been looking for in terms of Jake's development, what he's done under his new team that he's been praising so highly, what he's done in the gym in the last really year, because we haven't seen more than 1 round from him. I guess 2 if you add Borland and August in the last year, right? The last fight that even went past the first round was Nate Diaz. And to be fair, that was his first maybe 2 months, 3 months with his new team. So, that one was, I don't think it was a good judgment of where he was at in the development he made. However, as we said, he had 2 camps for Ryan Borland and Andre August. And while the fights didn't go very long, it's those camps that matter, and it's the development he's making in those camps that really matters. And we all said that going into the Perry fight, we're now going to see someone kind of similar to Nate in the sense of, going to try and come forward. He is a durable guy. And by the way, Mike Perry's a tough motherfucker. Maybe not as tough as Diaz, but, Mike was taking shots that, to be honest with you, it would have sat a lot of people down for good. So credit to Mike Perry there. But, the approach was kind of similar. Perry was going to try and get on the inside, cut distance off on Jake, switch up the angles. Diaz, kind of similarly, obviously Diaz has a different fighting style, but still, walk forward with the high guard, try and, make Jake overcrowd his work, get on the inside. And obviously, against Diaz, I think we can all admit, if we're being honest, that wasn't Jake's greatest performance. I think he kind of fell into Diaz's trap a little bit. He was almost putting himself on the inside at times, trying to work there instead of just keeping him at range with the jab. And I get that it's kind of hard with Nate Diaz, the way he fights, with that high guard just marching forward. It's hard to keep your distance against him. But, Jake won the fight. However, it wasn't his greatest showing. And that's why we said going into this fight, this is where we're going to finally see the development Jake's made. He's in there with a guy in Mike Perry who is tough, who can throw a lot harder than Diaz, is going to try and implement the same type of game plan Diaz is. And this is where we're going to see what he's done in the last year. And we finally saw it. And I think the first thing that, we got to take into consideration before we get into the pros and cons is this was a fight that Jake took on 3 weeks notice, 4 weeks at most. And, not only did he take the fight on short week notice or 3 week notice, but he also had to cut weight. And in fact, 38 pounds, which, he was probably really dehydrated, to be honest, on the night of the fight. Obviously went up to 230 pounds, 238 pounds actually for Mike Tyson. I'm going to be honest, I don't really get the move there. I don't know why he felt he needed to move up in weight. It doesn't make you hit harder, punching power and all that. That's about leverage and turning your punch and, how straight you're throwing your shots. So, putting muscle mass on, let alone, just body fat, that's not really going to make you hit harder. So I didn't understand the move up to 238, to be honest, but that's where he was. Had to cut that to get down to 200 to fight Mike Perry. And to be honest, I think, the first point, I feel like we saw that a bit. He fought at 200 against August and Borland, and he looked a lot sharper in those fights. This one, I don't know. His shots weren't looking as fast. Still powerful, but I just didn't feel that same, I didn't see that same speed from Jake that we saw against August and Borland. Also, I thought the volume from Jake would have been a little bit higher. I don't remember the exact punch stats. However, I don't know. I thought, his jab was good. I wish at times he, doubled up on it and tripled up on it. I thought, he was really reliant on his left hook, which has developed a lot, by the way. But I felt there were times he could have kept Mike at bay a bit more. And, I thought his footwork did look better. However, there were times when, he was just throwing wild shots. And that's something that I think he kind of realized, especially in the 5th round and the 6th round, is just chilling out a little bit, picking your shots, throwing shots straight. That's where you have your most success. So, I think he realized that in the later rounds of the fight, but definitely at the start, he was throwing some pretty wild looping shots. And, I guess that's normal to happen. You're in front of 20,000 people. He hasn't fought, I guess you could say a game opponent since Diaz. So, yeah, the pressure is probably there a bit, so I understand. I felt, defensively, Jake did okay. However, I'm going to be honest, there were a few left hooks from Mike that were getting through his guard. And, if we're just being honest, I don't really think he should have been getting hit a lot against Mike. Listen, it's boxing. You're going to get hit no matter what. However, I would think that Jake, just due to the reach advantage, I think Mike has a 71-inch reach. Jake has a 76-inch reach. I thought Jake would be able to keep him on the outside a little bit more easy. And, Mike was still getting through that left hook, which he really shouldn't have. And to be fair, Jake hasn't been in fights lately where his defense needs to be shown. He's been in front of guys who, once they get hit, they're not really throwing back at him. So now that he's in there with Mike Perry, Mike was throwing some shots back, and, he even cracked his rib in the first 30 seconds. So, shout out to Mike Perry. Again, he's a really tough guy, kept coming forward. But, yeah, man, I don't know. I thought defensively Jake didn't look his best. And we kind of noticed that in the Diaz fight as well, to be honest. Diaz was still landing some shots that weren't very impactful. Obviously, Diaz isn't known for his punching power, but he was still landing shots that I don't think he really should have been. And yeah, so defensively, I don't think Jake was, at his best. And obviously, again, taking a fight on 3 weeks' notice, cutting 38 pounds. I think he was even sick earlier on in the week. He said it himself. It wasn't his greatest performance. However, I thought he did a good job overall. But I didn't see a ton of improvement, if I'm going to be honest. Like, I didn't see anything from that I didn't see in the August fight, and I didn't really see in the Borland fight. Again, I thought he did a good job, but I wasn't blown away. Jake has gotten a lot better fundamentally, for sure. But I just felt maybe it was the style that Mike was bringing. Maybe it was also a combination of the circumstances, like the weight cut and Jake being sick going into the fight. I didn't really think it was his best performance. And another thing, too, this is the last thing I'll say before I let you go, Nathan, sorry. But I feel like the weight, I don't understand. Like, originally I thought, yeah, maybe 190 would be better for Jake. But I'm going to be honest, man, watching that fight, like, all of his shots, they just looked more lethargic. You know what I mean? Like, when he fought at 186 against Silva, 185 against Tommy Fury, there were even moments in that Tommy Fury fight that he was looking a lot more slick and fast and sharp than he did in any of his recent fights. And I think that just comes down to also the weight. Obviously, again, he was trying to get really heavy for the Mike Tyson fight. And I feel like, it's one of those things where it also probably comes down to what his team is wanting to build him into. They want him to become a power puncher. It's very evident. You can see that in his weight gain. That's what they want to do. But I just feel like, honestly, Jake's optimal weight probably is 185, 190. And I feel like that's one thing I also took away from it was, like, the weight that he's fighting at 200 pounds. I don't know if that's sustainable in an 8-round fight, especially if he's going to be in there with guys who have a higher volume. And that's one thing that we did say after watching August and Borland. We did say, yeah, he looks good at 200, but we don't know what this looks like in the later rounds. And we started to see a little glimpse of that in this fight. But again, no disrespect to Mike Perry, but if Jake signed up a Tommy Fury rematch, Mike Perry is not a preparation for Tommy at all. And if Jake has to match someone like Tommy on volume, I don't know how he's going to look in those later rounds at that weight. So those are my takeaways. Overall, I thought Jake did a good job. He did what he wanted to do, to be honest. Like, it was a pretty dominant fight. I gave Mike 1 round. But, yeah, I'd say it was overall a solid performance. But there are some holes that I did see that if you are looking at a Tommy rematch or even Alex Pereira for that matter, those are things that I think I want to see some more improvement from Jake on. But I went on for a long-ass time there. I'm sorry, guys, if I bored the fuck out of you. And Nathan, you've probably been sitting here for a while. So my bad, bro. You go ahead. I'll shut up.
Nah, man, all good. But look, twice in Jake's career, I've been, blown away by his performance in terms of his boxing development. That was when he went, fought Anderson Gibb under Shane Mosley. The jump from Deji to Gibb with the way Jake looked was incredible in my opinion. And again, with the way he looked against Anderson Silva under his former head coach Danny Smith, the jump he made in development from the Tyron Woodley rematch to Anderson Silva, I was blown away by that as well. So that's the 2 times really that Jake Paul has completely blown me away in terms of his performance levels and his development as a boxer. And I was really, really hoping this would be the 3rd occasion that would happen. But I've got to be honest, it just wasn't. I was expecting a lot more from Jake, and we didn't really get that. Look, his jab has improved tremendously. There's no question about that. His jab was snapping the head back of Mike Perry multiple times in that fight. His left hook too was looking really good. But I do still think that Jake's overall movement and technique or lack of at times, like it's kind of getting shown up now. And I think this is to do with the Kronk style, if I'm being honest, because you mentioned the weight earlier having an impact, and I definitely do agree there. But when he fought Nate Diaz, he was 185 pounds against Nate Diaz, and he still looked pretty sloppy within that fight. So I think the weight definitely is having an impact on that. But I think it's the overall style of boxing that Jake's now working under with his new coach Theo Chambers, the Kronk style. As we all know, the Kronk style is a more aggressive approach. It neglects defense a lot more. It's a more reckless style, trying to get in there and get the finish. I remember speaking to people from the Kronk gym who have said that they don't really believe in decisions at all. They just believe in knockouts. So to get the knockout, though, obviously you're going to get punched more, and that was something that I was actually concerned about when Jake was going to take on this style. I thought that he's going to get caught far more, and that proved to be the case against Nate Diaz. He get caught far too many times with Nate Diaz, who, no disrespect, but he's not like the most crisp boxer in the world. A lot of his punches are sloppy, and as you said earlier, you go into a boxing ring, you're going to get punched, but you get punched way too many times against Nate Diaz. He took far too much unnecessary damage. And again, against Mike Perry, the first 10 seconds of the fight, Jake lands a great body shot. As Mike Perry says, it cracked his rib. And that did, in my opinion, have an impact on Mike Perry's performance afterwards in terms of, he wasn't really throwing the right hand. I think maybe that was affecting his movement when he was throwing the right. But he was obviously throwing left hooks, but far too many left hooks were getting through Jake's guard. And to me, that is concerning because now Jake Paul's obviously calling out Alex Pereira. And Alex Pereira, as we all know, hits far harder than Mike Perry. He's far bigger than Mike Perry. He's going to be far more dangerous than Mike Perry. And if those left hooks from Mike Perry are getting through Jake's guard, then if Alex Pereira's hooks are getting through, it's going to cause far more. It's going to put Jake under far more trouble. So that is a concerning aspect of things. It doesn't seem like Jake's defense is being worked on as strongly as his offense, which is something obviously the Kronk style are obviously famous for too. But so I do have a lot of concerns, to be fair, going forward with Jake. I was really hoping to be wild like I was, as I said, with those two other performances he had throughout his career, but I just wasn't, to be honest with you. I didn't see a huge significant improvement in Jake's technique. Like under his former coach Danny Smith, I thought when he was boxing, Anderson Silva and even the Tommy Fury fight, despite the fact obviously the Tommy Fury fight, the build up to that fight, it wasn't the best preparation, as we all know. I still felt Jake looked far more like a boxer in there. He was far more technical. He was far more tight in the way he was moving around the ring. He was far more compact, and he wasn't anywhere near as sloppy as he's looked against Nate Diaz, as he's looked against Mike Perry. And also when you look at the Ryan Bourne performance, those last 10 seconds of that fight when Jake's trying to get the finish, how wild he was throwing. It was honestly, it reminded me of that time Logan Paul fought Floyd Mayweather, and that moment he had that barrage Logan where he tried to take Floyd's head off, but it just looked so amateur with the way he was throwing his punches. There was no real technique there. It was sort of like that with the way Jake was trying to finish Ryan Borland, but just couldn't really land the punch on Ryan Borland's head. So I think this Kronk style's got Jake too sloppy. I think the technique seems to have been neglected too much. And I'm just being honest. I'm just saying what I see. You know what I mean? That's what I do on here. I don't sugarcoat anything. So I really hope that Jake can start to improve his technique more, because the way he was looking before, he was actually looking like a boxer. He really was. But over the last few fights, he's kind of I don't know, he's not really seemed as much of a boxer anymore. He just seemed too wild, in my opinion. And another, stat I want to bring out is the fact that against Nate Diaz, as you mentioned, Nick, earlier, in terms of the weight that Jake's cut for this fight, 40 odd pounds of weight, that was obviously going to have an impact on his cardio, on his output, and it did, because I look at the stats for the Diaz fight over 10 rounds. He threw 500 punches, 50 punches a round on average. Against Mike Perry, he was throwing 216 punches, it was, over the course of the 6 rounds, and that worked out at about 37 punches per round. That's 13 less punches per round Jake was throwing against Mike Perry compared to what he was throwing against Nate Diaz. And obviously the weight cut would have had an impact on that. So too would have obviously Mike Perry being a more dangerous opponent than Nate Diaz, that would have also maybe impacted it too. But 13 less punches, that is quite a drop in output in comparison to the fight he had a year ago with Nate Diaz. So I don't know. I do see one too many red flags. And if Jake is calling it Alex Pereira, if he is wanting that Tommy Fury rematch, if he is eyeing up guys like that, he's going to have to show a significant improvement in what he's actually showing right now if he's going to win those boxing matches, in my opinion. So that is the concern there for that. But, I just want to kind of get what your thoughts are on that before, I go into other aspects of it.
I think you made a good point there about, him calling out other guys and how that's going to work. I mean, for Tommy Fury, like, if that fight is being eyed up for February or May or whatever it is, like next year, in my opinion, yeah, I don't think Jake has shown enough against who he's fought to even make a solid argument for why he could easily beat Tommy now. Like, think of it like this. Tommy Fury, what attributes does he have that any opponent Jake's fought in the last year has? None. Tommy Fury is a longer fighter. He's got a good jab. He throws combinations. That's something Nate Diaz, Ryan Borland, Andre August, Mike Perry, they're all shorter fighters than Jake, right? They don't have the reach Tommy Fury has, and they don't throw the combinations that Tommy does. So those are all things that Jake struggled with the first time. He's against guys right now who, he's longer than he can work off his jab. He's not having to get on the inside the way he would against Tommy Fury. So, I would hope that if he is going to take that rematch, that the first time he sees that sort of a style again, I know he's probably sparring with guys, that emulate Tommy or whatever, but I would hope that, I don't think it'd be a bad idea, to be honest, if he just fought maybe not an Andre August, like, complete no-name opponent, but honestly, man, I wouldn't be opposed to him just getting some rounds in, maybe go back to the Creed Royale, do one of those fights again before the Tommy rematch, and just find someone like Tommy who has a longer reach than you, throws in combinations, has a high output. I think that is what Jake needs to show under the lights before you can just be confident about him going into a rematch. And again, that's no disrespect to Nate Diaz, Perry, or anyone. They're all good opponents. I'm just saying they don't have the same attributes that Tommy Fury does. And if you're talking about it on a boxing level, they don't compare to Tommy Fury. And it just is what it is. But I do think, you mentioned Pereira. Again, Pereira's the guy who, if he's landing some of those shots on Jake, it could be a bad night. And Jake has a chin, to be honest. He really does have a good chin. But the damage that he's taken, again, against some shorter fighters, Pereira, another guy who I don't know his reach off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure he has a longer reach than Jake. He's a tall guy, so, and he's naturally heavier than Perry and Diaz and August and Borland. So, again, I think there's a lot of factors in there to where you can't make the comparison or the jump to Tommy Fury right now and be confident, or Pereira right now and be 100% confident. And, another thing, too, that I want to mention, I think, this is kind of important. We always talked about, Jake under his old coach and comparing it to his new coach. I think a big thing that you have to look at more than that is just the opponents he was facing. It's kind of weird how Jake's career went. He started off facing really tough opponents. Listen, people can say, oh, well, they're UFC fighters, whatever. Every UFC fighter Jake's been in there with has taken, besides Askren, has taken a round off him, multiple rounds off him, or went to distance. You can say, Woodley got knocked out. The first fight went to distance, and to be honest, he could have been winning the second up to that point. Silva went to distance. Diaz went to distance. So Jake has never been, known for just getting these UFC guys out there quickly. They are guys who, Jake, 3 years into boxing, 2 years into boxing, are good-ass opponents. And honestly, guys, he really shouldn't have been fighting at that stage. Because, as I'm going to say, what do you do when you have an opponent in front of you who is a lot more experienced in combat than you, and you're still green? You're not focusing on your fundamentals. You're not focusing on your footwork. You're not focusing on how you're turning your punches. You're not worried about that because you can't be built up and developed like an amateur boxer fighting opponents that amateur boxers don't fight. So if Jake's going into an 8-week camp, he's focusing on a game plan how to beat these guys. That's it. He's not working on how to turn his punches properly. He's not, you know what I mean? Those are stages of his career that he missed. And it's not because of his coaches. It's because of who he was fighting, right? So he almost had this weird transition in his career where he was fighting the tougher fighters, but he wasn't focusing on those fundamentals. And now he's focused on those fundamentals and he's building on his actual style. And now he's trying to implement it, taking the step up to those tougher opponents again. So I feel like he's kind of in a weird stage where he's still kind of finding himself as a fighter, maybe still really learning, obviously the fundamentals as he's shown. And now it's starting to apply that against the tougher fighters. Mike Perry is 100% a step up from Diaz, in my opinion, from Borland, and from August. So, it's almost like he's climbing back up that ladder now with a new skill set. And I think that should be taken into account too. He did have a very weird career trajectory in a sense. So I feel like that can maybe be it too on why we're not seeing these, as you said, breakthrough, shocking performances that we saw before.
Yeah, as you said, one thing that does have to get mentioned is the fact that what these UFC fighters are showing, though, in the boxing ring, they're giving Jake multiple rounds, unlike what Ryan Borland and August brought to the table. The journeyman approach, the traditional path approach that all boxers face at the start of their careers to pad their records with, it's just not the approach Jake should be taking, in my opinion. As you said, he's got to now find opponents that can replicate, some future opponents he's wanting to take on. He's wanting to take on Tommy Fury, obviously. Obviously, he's wanting to take on Alex Pereira. Well, do you know what? If he's going to take on Tommy Fury in a rematch, he's going to have to face a guy under the lights. It's all well and good facing guys in the gym and sparring, but we all know it's not the same as being under the lights. He's going to have to face a guy that brings that sort of same threat level to him. And then if he can get through that, that will obviously give him the confidence to then go and hopefully defeat Tommy Fury in the rematch. But, I do think that has to be taken into consideration. And, I don't know. I just think that, these UFC fighters, they will give Jake a far tougher match in the boxing ring, but they don't have that jab. And as they say, the most important punch in boxing is the jab. They say that for a reason. And it did show in that fight with Tommy Fury. That was the biggest difference, in my opinion, between Jake and Tommy that night. Obviously, Tommy was throwing good combinations too, which also did cause Jake issues. But the jab, definitely, in my opinion, especially with that reach Tommy has, he does have that freakish reach, doesn't he? He's got freakish long arms. That was just,
I think he has an 80-inch reach.
Yeah,
I think that's what it said on the broadcast.
Yeah, he does have a freaky long arms, Tommy Fury, and that did prove to be decisive, in my opinion, during that fight. So that's definitely something Jake will have to face more in order to win that rematch. And the UFC fighters, they don't bring that jab, but they do bring a toughness to the ring. And as I said, there was also good aspects of the performance. Don't get us wrong. That the left hook was looking really, really good. The jab, as I said, Jake's improving with the jab. It definitely has to be credited a lot. It really was snapping Mike Perry's head back multiple times in that fight. Mike Perry just couldn't get on the inside of Jake. Yeah, Jake is the longer guy, but you still have to be popping a jab off. And Mike Perry did get in a few times too many, but overall, Jake Paul did keep him at bay enough with that jab. And but still need to see more development from Jake if he's going to win rematches against Tommy Fury, and then for the Pereira fight if he's going to win that too.
That's what it is. It's not even just shitting on. It's not. I feel like we're not being critical on the performance because of it being Mike Perry. It's that if you're looking at a fight like Tommy and you're looking at a world title, which he said, and you're wanting to do that soon, that is the standard we have to hold him to. You know what I mean? So yeah, if that's what he's eyeing up for the next year, then for sure there are things that need to be worked on. And also, just talking about the Tommy Fury rematch one more time, is the goal to out-volume Tommy? Because I don't think going in and trying to find one shot that's going to put his lights out is a good plan. It didn't work the first time. So I would think he would try and, out-volume Tommy in a rematch, which sounds crazy, but, I think Jake would try to implement a similar game plan, put Tommy on the back foot, and just be a bit more aggressive than he was the first time, have a higher output. Then the question is, does he have a higher output at his current weight in what could even be a 10-round fight with Tommy in the rematch? You know what I mean? That's the question. That's why I say I feel like he should be at 185. I'm just being honest. I think that's his optimal weight. I think he feels more comfortable at 200, and I would guess he thinks he hits harder at that weight. But I don't know, man. Just watching that Silva fight back and even watching the Tommy fight back, in certain points, he just looked a lot more sharp at 185. I'm not saying he should get down to 170 or something like that. I'm just saying 185 seemed to be his best weight, just in my opinion. But, he's a fighter. He knows how he feels. One thing I will say is 230 pounds is outrageous. There's no way you can convince me that he should be fighting at 238 pounds or walking around at 238 pounds. I understand, it's Mike Tyson. He's a heavyweight. But almost 240 pounds is that is crazy. You know what I mean? And that's where, to be fair, that's where some intrigue will come in for the Tyson fight. I'll be excited to see how he looks at that weight, against Mike. But going forward, I just think even going up to 240, 230, whatever it is for one fight, it's the coming back down in weight. You don't want to be fluctuating weight like that. You know what I mean? And I understand it's a great money opportunity for Jake. It's a great opportunity, the Tyson fight. But I think he should just come in maybe a little bit over 200. I feel like 240, 238, that's just crazy in my opinion.
Yeah, I think against Mike Tyson though, at that weight, he probably will still get away with it, given it's going to be 2-minute rounds. So that's the saving grace there for Jake at that weight. That it's going to be 2-minute rounds to 3-minute rounds, so it won't have as big an impact there on his cardio. But again, as you said, I don't think that it's good for Jake to get up at these high weights and then try and bring himself back down again. Because a lot of the opponents he's calling out, besides Alex Pereira, who he could fight at heavyweight, a lot of the other opponents he won't be able to fight them at heavyweight. He's going to have to fight them at 200 or lower. he's going to have to bring himself back down there. And weight cutting, man, it's one of the hardest things to do in combat sports, isn't it? So you don't want to do that to your body one too many times.
And by the way, being, just to sort of cut you off there, but being the bigger fighter, like let's say him and Tommy agree to fight cruiserweight. Tommy weighs in, let's say 185. Jake weighs in right on 200. Jake being the heavier fighter in that fight, it doesn't mean it's going to win him the fight or even benefit him. You want to be, at your optimal weight. So if Tommy Fury cuts down to 185, yeah, he's going to rehydrate a bit, but so will Jake. And there will still be a size difference between the two of them. And Tommy at a lower weight, it's going to make it even easier for him to have a higher output than Jake. You know what I mean? So being the heavier fighter isn't always a good thing. Because I know people would probably say to your point, they'd say, oh, well, they do the Tommy rematch, Jake will be at 200 and Tommy, might be lower. But that's not always a good thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. But see, the thing is, like, see the root of it all. I think it may be the style, to be honest with you, the Kronk style, rather than... I do agree the weight definitely is having an impact, but when you think about the way he looked against Nate Diaz, I think we're all in agreement that he was really sloppy in that fight, far too sloppy.
I thought he looked better against Tommy Fury than he did Nate Diaz. Just being 100% honest.
But against Nate Diaz, he came in at 185, didn't he? So he was at that sort of weight, for that fight, and he was still looking pretty sloppy in there. And, that was down at that weight that you're saying you feel is his optimum weight. So is it the weight, or is it this Kronk style that we're seeing? Like, is that what's making Jake look far more sloppy in that ring? Because, as I said, the last 10 seconds against Borland, in my opinion, was a really bad look, the way he was throwing those punches extremely wildly. Same too with the Diaz performance. Overall, it was a far too sloppy performance. And, as I said, besides the jab that was looking really good against Mike Perry and a few left hooks, overall, again, he was looking just too sloppy, in my opinion. There wasn't a significant technical development improvement from Nate Diaz to Mike Perry. And that is very worrying when you consider the fact that those two fights were a year apart. So that should have been more than enough time. I mean, the gap between the Woodley rematch and Silva was, around about 10 months, 9 months? So, when you think about the gap between Diaz and Mike Perry being about 10 months, 11 months, I do think we should have seen far more development from Jake in that fight. And to me, just being honest, like, I just didn't see it. So I don't know if it's the style of boxing, maybe Jake's in there and he's a bit confused. Does he just be a bit more reckless and not throw as much caution to the wind and just let his hands fly? But it's making him look less technical in there, as I keep saying. Whereas before, he just seemed to be far more strategic in the way he boxed. He just, as I said, looked far more like a boxer before. And I don't know. I'm just kind of being honest with what I see. I don't want to sugarcoat anything, as I said. So, but look, as I said, Jake Paul's got Mike Tyson. That's 4 months away. So, there's enough time there for Jake to develop more in the gym. But obviously, it's going to be at a much higher weight. It's going to be 2-minute rounds, and Mike Tyson's obviously going to bring. He's going to just swing for the fences, isn't he, Mike Tyson? We all know he brings that peekaboo style of boxing to the ring, so Jake obviously going to have to prepare himself for that. His defense 100% has to be sharper against Mike Tyson. It cannot be as leaky as it was against Diaz and Mike Perry, because you take a punch from Mike Tyson, yeah, I know it's 14-ounce gloves, and I know Mike Tyson is in his late 50s, but as Jake and others have always said, power is the last thing to leave you as a combat athlete. Mike Tyson will still hit like a freight train. Don't worry about that, that's for sure. So Jake Paul cannot allow Mike Tyson's hands to get through his guard one too many times, or Jake could be in trouble, bro. Seriously, if his defense isn't tightened up for that Mike Tyson fight in 4 months' time, he could be in trouble.
No, for sure. And I think that's also, again, what makes the Tyson fight so intriguing. He said it in the build-up. He said Mike Perry's, he's an appetizer for Mike Tyson. And, again, Mike Perry had his moments, so you can't tell me that Mike Tyson can't possibly have a good moment against Jake Paul and even catch him with something, because Mike Perry was, you know what I mean? And Mike Perry, by no means, in my opinion, even still hits harder than Mike Tyson. So, yeah, man, I think, listen, the Tyson fight, I'm excited for that one, man. I know people are going to say, oh, I can't believe I'm excited for that, man. And you know what? Everyone talking shit about it, they're going to watch it too, so I don't want to hear it. But,
Yeah, and do you know what? Another thing just on the Mike Tyson fight?
Yeah.
Go watch Nakisa's interview, Jake's manager, with Ariel Helwani, and you will see that Netflix came to Jake Paul about doing a one-fight deal, and then further down the line, it was Mike Tyson's team who reached out to Nakisa, Jake's team, and said they wanted that fight to happen. Jake Paul, Nakisa, they did not initiate the Mike Tyson fight. Mike Tyson, his team, wanted that fight. And when Mike Tyson comes calling, you don't say no. You accept that fight. Mike Tyson wants it. Jake wants it. They're going to make it happen. the money Jake's going to make, the exposure he's going to get on that platform, Netflix. It's incredible. It's life changing, you know, and it's a historic moment as well. Like, it just is. People can say all they want, they can hate all they want, but that's the facts of it. So there's no way Jake can be expected to turn something like that down. You'd have to be crazy to think Jake would turn an opportunity like that down. So Jake's right to go through with it, in my opinion. I don't care what anyone says. The business is far too good to refuse. And as I said, Mike Tyson and his team were the ones who approached Jake and his team about this fight, not the other way around. So people keep on getting that twisted, it seems.
No, for sure. Even Mike Perry said in the build-up, he's like, man, if Mike Tyson came to me with an offer, I'd love to fight Mike Tyson. It'd be an honor. Yeah, man, I think, again, it's an opportunity you can't really pass up. And especially with it being on Netflix, that's innovative to combat sports. Like, it's bringing 6 generations together to watch it. It's going to be a huge fight. One last thing I'll say before we leave. I know we've been going 30 minutes, which I think might be a record. Or no, our pod with Matt was, I think it was 50 minutes.
Almost never.
Yeah. But the one last thing I'll say, to be fair, would you, like, Diaz and Perry, their style of how, they're coming forward, it is different from Silva, and it is different from Woodley, right? So maybe Perry doesn't hit as hard as Woodley, and maybe Nate doesn't hit as hard as Woodley, but the way that they're fighting is different from Woodley and Silva. You know what I mean? Jake was able to find himself on the front foot in those fights more easily, and, Silva wanting to fight Jake on the inside, kind of similar to Perry in a way. But I'm just saying the different styles that Jake is fighting now opposed to before, that could also be why you're not seeing as smooth boxing, especially when you have guys like a guy like Diaz marching forward just trying to cluster all your work, clutter all your work.
But then how does that explain those last 10 seconds against Ryan Boland where technique went completely out the window?
I think that's just the thing where it's like the guy's not throwing back. You need to get him out of there.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's great, but I'm just saying that's probably what it is. But yeah, I don't know, man.
That is definitely, those are definitely factors to be considered.
But this is where I say when he fights Tommy again, that's when we'll see. That is when we will see a direct comparison in his development, because that is an opponent he faced before with his old team and now with his new team. So I'll be excited for that one as well. But let us know what you guys think down in the comments, and we'll see you next time.